now. Y'all are early. We have 5 minutes before the official telecast begins, or not telecast, it's whatever it is. Yeah. So you can just sort of rest here for a moment. It is nice to be here, and it's nice to see all of you here. Every time I come, there's more people here in this room, and it's really delightful to see that, and lots of new people. That's really cool. So to introduce myself before we talk is, my name is Tom Broadwater. I have been associated with this center for over 24 years. I'm not as active as I once was. I'm getting old, you know. You have to slow down. So, but I am here today and excited about being here. So we'll wait a few more minutes. So again, my name is Tom Broadwater, and the talk today I'm going to talk about Milarepa, who's a Tibetan saint. His tanka, which is a picture of him, is right here. So let me ask a question real quickly. How many, is this the first time they've been here, if I may ask that? Oh, you all been here before. Oh, Britt, welcome. Glad to see you here. So how many of you have heard of Milarepa? Ah, good. But there's a few I'm introducing Milarepa to for the first time, so that's great. Before we begin, what we do traditionally is say the refuge prayer. And if you want to say it along with me, you're welcome to do that. If not, that's okay too. It's called the Refuge Prayer, and we'll say it in English 3 times. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the power of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. So again, welcome. Glad to see you all here. There is certainly a quorum here. We could take a vote. Someone suggested we take a vote on impermanence, and I said that's not an option. Things are impermanent. But I'm going to talk today about Milarepa. And by show of hands, I see that most of you have some acquaintance with him. So my introduction will be brief. So what I'm going to do today is I'll give a brief introduction and identify who Milarepa is. Then we'll go into a little deeper dive in terms of his life history. Then I'm going to read one of his songs, which is, it's a beautiful song. And then finally, I'm going to tell you what I think, it's just my opinion, what I think the relevance of a 10th or 11th century saint is to our lives right now. So to begin with, Milarepa, whoop, I lost my place. Let me go back to the beginning. So to begin with, Milarepa was a 11th century Tibetan saint. He lived in really an exciting time because Tibetan Buddhism had sort of been on the decline, and all of a sudden there were these pilgrims who went to India, took new teachings, particularly about the Tantras, and brought them back to Tibet. So there was an excitement in the air because there was a renewal of Tibetan Buddhism. And part of that renewal, again, was that the Tantras were being brought back. There were what is called the 6 yogas of Milarepa. They were brought back, and the quintessential, or how shall I say it? Yeah, quintessential meditation on Mahamudra. The meditation where we learn how to look at our own mind with recognition. Anyway, Milarepa, who's shown here, was a student of Marpa, who was a translator who had gone to India and brought back all these teachings. And he was subsequently the teacher of Gampopa, who is like the father of our lineage, the Kagyu lineage. And again, Marpa brought back teachings on Mahamudra and Tantra teachings. He brought them to Tibet. Gampopa, you might say, was a consolidator of the different streams of teaching that were current within Tibet, and he brought them into greater clarity into one lineage, the Kagyu lineage. You could sort of say that Milarepa was a bridge between old India and the new Tibet. And and that transmission of all those teachings come down to us in what's called the Golden Rosary, which means that each teacher taught his student, and that student then taught the next student, and so forth, on down through the line of Karmapas. So that it's a golden rosary in the sense that the first teacher is related to the last teacher because that teaching is so pure. And it's called the Golden Rosary of the Kagyu lineage. And again, Milarepa is one of those representatives of that Golden Rosary. Milarepa is honored by every Tibetan. He's called the singing yogi. He was a Tibetan folk hero. His story has been told over and over and over. And it's one that I never get tired of telling because of who Milarepa was. You'll see that in the picture, his body is a bit emaciated. He was an ascetic. He had no concern for the worldly concerns we have. So he didn't care too much about what food he was eating on any given day. The other thing is, you see his right hand is lifted to his ear, and that's so he can hear his teacher's teachings from afar. So the question comes to mind, well, how or why is he still popular within Tibetan Buddhism after 10 centuries? There's probably a lot of reasons for that, but the chief among them is the fact that Milarepa began as an ordinary person. He was ordinary as dirt, as ordinary as you and me. We come to think of saints as, you know, their births are announced by angels, and, you know, it's a big deal. He just had an ordinary birth. So there was nothing extraordinary to mark him in the beginning. In fact, he was very imperfect. And he experienced great difficulty and struggle. And anybody who's on this path, this spiritual path in Buddhism, understands the nature of obstacles and difficulties. You might dismiss him as from an ancient time and a distant culture, but he's relatable because at the beginning of his life, he was just like you and me. He came from a dysfunctional family. And his early life was filled with anger, resentment, and that resentment and anger caused the death of his kinsfolk. He was actually a murderer. He killed 35 people. But eventually, he takes the inspiring journey out of deep regret, great regret, to enlightenment. So that's an inspiring story, to realize that you and me probably have not committed, raise your hands, has anyone committed that many murders? Of course not. The point being is, we start where we're at, and it's okay. Wherever we come through that door, whatever we bring with us, it's perfectly okay. We are preceded by folks that have done much worse than anything we could contemplate doing. There are many different accounts of Milarepa. The one that I really like was compiled by Songyan Heruka, and this is the book that I'm going to be reading from today. It's a wonderful book. There was a previous book that was a translation back in, I think, 1963 or thereabouts, and it wasn't a very good translation. This is a wonderful translation. It's called The 100,000 Songs of Milarepa. A little secret here. There's no 100,000 songs of Milarepa. There are about 363 songs, actually. So how did it get to be 100,000 songs? Well, the word in Tibetan for collection is also the word for 100,000. So the original translator back in 1963 mistranslated collection to be 100,000. And because everybody sort of likes that title, it was kept even in this one. So you know something that maybe other people don't know. It's the collection of songs of Milarepa. This book is divided into two parts. The first are the songs, and in the back part is actually the life of Milarepa. Like I said, I'll read one of those songs before we close out today. So Milarepa was born to a relatively wealthy family. He was given the name originally of Tompa Ga, which means delightful to hear. One of the things you'll find out in Tibetan lore is that people receive different names at different points in their lives based upon events in their lives or accomplishments they had. But in any case, his first name was delightful to hear. His father died before Milarepa reached majority, and at his death, his father entrusted his wealth to his brother and Milarepa's uncle and aunt. And that money was to be held in trust until Milarepa reached majority. As you can tell, ancient Tibetan culture was very patriarchal. Women didn't do fair well in that sort of situation. And in particularly, Milarepa's mother didn't do well, because at the point where Milarepa was ready to receive the money, his uncle wouldn't give it to either his mother or to Milarepa. He kept it. And the mother, obviously, all this time hoping and believing that this inheritance was coming to her, was very resentful and angry, so resentful. She sent her son on a mission to learn how to actually do harm to those relatives that held the money. And the story goes that one time at a big feast that the family was throwing, Milarepa caused the roof in the banquet hall to fall in and kill all 35 relatives. Exactly how that's done or he did it, I don't know. And the story's not real clear about it, but everybody's clear about the fact that he did murder those folks. His mother was really pleased about that, very happy about that. And Milarepa at the time was pleased and was happy about that. But what happened was all the villagers found out that Milarepa had killed these relatives, and they ran him out of town. And so Milarepa had to he was all alone, shunned by the community. And what happened then was he felt great remorse, great sadness about what his anger, what his resentment had caused. So he looked for a way to liberate himself from this burden that he carried. He became really restless, looking for an answer. And he knew that the answer would come through the Dharma. So the first teacher he had, according to the stories in this book, is that his teacher was a Dzogchen teacher who apparently didn't do much good for him, because all that Milarepa did when he was in the presence of this teacher was lay in bed and sleep. So the Dzogchen teacher said, well, maybe I'm not the one for you. So he said, there is a teacher that I'm going to send you to, and his name is Marpa. He's really a great teacher. When Milarepa heard the name Marpa, his heart melted. He knew that was going to be his teacher. And that happens sometimes. You will hear the name of your teacher, and it may bring tears to your eyes. And that's what happened to Marpa. He, without seeing Marpa, fell in love with the idea of being around him. So Marpa's a really character in himself, and we could do a whole story on him. But to make a long story short, he was a pretty angry, wrathful, I should say, not angry, a wrathful kind of a teacher. So anyway, Milarepa goes to the farm that Marpa was living on. Marpa was a farmer, businessman, translator, just a sort of a jack of all trades. Anyway, he goes to Marpa. Marpa disguises himself because he's not ready yet to reveal himself to Milarepa. So he's plowing a field, and he sees Milarepa come in, and Milarepa says, "Can you tell me where Marpa is?" And Marpa says, "Yeah, I can tell you, but first I want you to plow my field for me." So Milarepa plows Marpa's field, after which Marpa does reveal himself as being the teacher. And Milarepa falls down on his knees and prostrates to his new teacher. But again, Marpa was a pretty wrathful fella. And Milarepa knew from the beginning he better be careful around this fella because of his wrath. The way he taught Milarepa is not conventional. What he did was he said, I want you to build these buildings for me. So, okay, this is preliminary to my teaching. I guess I'm going to have to do it. And also Marpa said, I can either teach you or I can feed you. I can't do both. You're going to have to find provisions elsewhere. And of course, Milarepa chose to be taught. The nice thing about it is Marpa had a really loving, compassionate wife. And behind Marpa's back, she provided Milarepa with provisions. Marpa probably knew it, but anyway, this is how the relationship began. Milarepa would build this tower or this building halfway done, and Marpa said, I don't like the looks of that, tear it down. Start over again. He did this 5 times. Building a building, starting out, getting halfway finished, and it was, so, that would be pretty hard to do. At some point, Milarepa, being ordinary at the time, got discouraged, and he left. And he took some teachings from another teacher, but he felt like he wanted to go back to Marpa. And Marpa, secretly in his own heart, wanted Milarepa to come back because he knew he was what you would call a destined son. And so he was happy when he came back, and then at that point, Marpa instructed Milarepa in all the teachings that he had learned from going to India and bringing those teachings back. And of course, at that point, Marpa treated Milarepa much differently. And he actually tells Milarepa, hey, I was pretty wrathful with you, but you had a lot of bad karma that needed to be purified. So in order to do that, I had to be pretty rough on you. You passed the test, and now you're ready. And then, so, again, Marpa accepted Milarepa as a student. During the time that Marpa taught Milarepa, he lived in the caves of Tibet. And if you go to Tibet today, there are holy places where Milarepa hung out to meditate. So Marpa would give him instructions on how to meditate, and of course, then he would go off, and Marpa would go off, or Milarepa would go off and meditate. And so he increased his faith, which was pretty strong anyway, his faith and his love. He became realized. But then at some point, Milarepa had this dream about returning to his homeland. He was sort of melancholy for that. So he left Marpa. And as he was leaving Marpa, Marpa said to him, to Milarepa, I won't see you again. You've got all the teachings you need. It's now time for you to go out into the world and be an example of the Buddha's teaching. He said actually to be the son, S-U-N, of the Buddha, and to illuminate those teachings throughout Tibet. So Milarepa returns to his homeland and sees the devastation that he had done on the community. His mother had passed away, and his sister was now reduced to being a beggar. So he sees all that, and it's probably one of the saddest points in Milarepa's life, because he recognized cause and effect. You do certain things will happen. And he looked and he saw the devastation of what he had caused, and he was very sad. But that did not, sometimes when we see the results of our misdeeds, what happens? We get depressed and we say, oh, poor me, but, how horrible I am. Milarepa had faith in his own liberation. He had faith that the teachings could purify all this bad karma that he had created, and that he could liberate himself definitively from suffering. So what might have caused you or me to get discouraged or fall apart was not what happened to Milarepa. He went on based upon his faith. So he traveled the countryside, and he gave these songs and teachings throughout Tibet. And again, those are what's found in this book. One of Milarepa's disciples, Shiva was his name, tells Milarepa that he is amazed at Milarepa's endurance of hardship. He didn't carry a lot of money with him. He just begged from one community to the next. And how could you do that, Shiva asked. He said, that's impossible. And what Milarepa said was, and Shiva said, because of that, you must be an emanation of the Buddha himself. Milarepa said, no, I'm not an emanation of the Buddha. I'm an ordinary person. But here's the difference. The difference is that I understand the law of cause and effect. And if you truly understood, fully understood karma, cause and effect, you could do what I did and what I am doing. That what I have accomplished is accessible to you based upon your understanding cause and effect. We don't understand that. We think, secretly we all think we're going to get by with stuff, right? It's not so. It's going to, some point or another, catch up with us. Milarepa was wise enough to recognize that every act one performs has a consequence. And because of that, he woke up. Furthermore, he said, Milarepa said, even if I were an emanation of a hell being, if my disciples believed I was a Buddha, they would receive the blessings of the Buddha. So, Milarepa said that any common person, such as you and me, who has a heartfelt conviction regarding cause and effect will have fear of the lower realms and attain Buddhahood. The story told by Sangyon Heruka ends with a miraculous account of Milarepa's death, told the third person. At the end, Milarepa gives some Dharma advice to his students, and at the age of 84, his body dissolves into the Dharma Dhatu, the great expanse. And after his death, there was a rumor that Milarepa left behind a big pot of gold for his disciples. And this third-person narrator says, and I'm just going to say what they say in the book. It's not what I'm saying. It's what it said. Anybody that believes that Milarepa had a pot of gold for his disciples, his mouth is full of shit. That's what he said. I didn't say it. He said. The point being here is that it's not, he doesn't have, following the path of liberation does not necessarily mean you're going to collect a lot of wealth, fame, or fortune. And in fact, the likelihood is you won't. People that come to the Dharma thinking that somehow all of my life's karma is immediately going to be cleared up and immediately all of my pursuits in this world are going to be wonderful, are going to be disappointed. What Milarepa is giving us is far more important than a pot of gold. He, through his example and his teachings, are telling us we can be liberated from suffering forever. And that's, I think everyone would agree, that's more important. So let's go back to the 100,000 songs that appear in the first part of this book. We said Milarepa's life appears in the second part of the book, and in the first part, it's his songs. And he sings these songs that are called songs of liberation or dohas. And it's a tradition within Tibetan culture for religious folk to spontaneously, what spontaneously arises within them from their realization are songs. They're joyous, happy songs about their liberation. And they're also practical manuals for students. There's nothing very philosophical about any of this. There's no big philosophical discussion in the songs. They're just practical advice to folks. For us beginners, he talks about faith, karma, cause and effect, and the 6 paramitas, the virtues that lead us to liberation. For more advanced students, he talks about the profound topics of the Vajrayana, the 6 yogas of Milarepa. By the way, I can't teach about the 6 yogas of Milarepa for a lot of reasons. One is I'm not qualified. 2, this isn't the right place. Usually it's done within a retreat setting. And 3, quite honestly, you're probably not ready. So for all those reasons, I can't talk to you about the 6 yogas. Now, you can go out and buy books on it. I wouldn't advise that because generally you need a good teacher a qualified teacher to talk to you about those. So anyway, the 100,000 songs were a compilation by his students of all of his teachings and songs. There's a contemporary Lama by the name of Khenpo Sultram Gyamtso, who, that's what he does with students. He's made a lot of songs. It's like a songbook, and with every teaching, he begins with one of his songs. Khenpo Sultram came here to Columbus probably 20 years ago. Was anyone here when that happened? Yeah, he's a crazy yogi. He's wonderful. He had Lama Kathy dancing. Anyway, the songs are there are a number of, you can go and look and find different songs being sung by Khenpo Sultram's students. I chose one song today to give you a flavor of what they're like. I chose the story of, quote, meeting Paldarbum, P-A-L-D-A-R-B-U-M, Paldarbum. And the songs and story center on two women, one a grandmother and the other a teenage girl. Milarepa gave perhaps his most clear instructions in all of the songs to these two women. So I'm going to read a passage from them. It's going to take me a few minutes, but we have the time. I'm not great at a dramatic readings, but I'll do my best. So this is the story of Paldarbum. So again, the picture here is Milarepa is a yogi. He's traveling around. Wherever he goes, he meets people. He's very friendly, and he'll give teachings. So anyway, so the Jetsam, that means saint, the saint Milarepa, intended to go to John Topo Snow Mountain to meditate. He left in the autumn, and on his way, he came upon the village of Gepa, Lasem, in Chung. When he arrived there, all the villagers were working to reap the harvest. In particular, in a large field, there was a girl of about 15 years of age who had the signs of wisdom, Dakini, and was leading a large group of people in the harvest. Milarepa went over to them and said, "Benefactors, I'm a yogi, and I am seeking some provisions." The girl said, "Yogi, go to the door of my house over there. I will come and meet you." So Jetsam went to the door of the house and pushed it open with his walking stick. The door swung open and he entered. After a moment, an old woman wearing ragged, dirty clothes came up from within the house carrying a fistful of ashes in her hand. "You beggar yogis," she says. "In the summer, you come begging for butter and cheese, and in the winter, it's beer and grain. You never stay put. I'll bet you're going to try to steal my daughter and daughter-in-law's jewelry, and came over when you thought there would be no one at home." Her body was quivering with rage, and just as she was about to hurl the ashes at Milarepa, the Jetsam said, "Grandmother, before you throw those ashes at me, listen to a little song of Milarepa." Then he sang this song of realization on 9 points for the grandmother. 1, above is the bliss of the higher realms and freedom. 2, below is the suffering of the 3 lower realms. 3, in between are those without control over their minds. When these three convene upon you, Grandma, you're cruel and detest the Dharma. Take care of yourself and look at your mind. If you do something, practice the Dharma. If you follow something, follow a qualified guru. When at first you were betrothed in this family, did you think you'd become this kind of woman? You know, she's sort of a cranky old lady. And Milarepa said, did you really think when you know, in the blossom of your betrothal, did you think you'd wind up this person who's a cranky old lady? So he goes on, 1, in the morning you rise so early. 2, in the evening you retire so late. 3, your work doesn't ever cease. When these 3 things convene upon you, Grandma, you're a miserable, unpaid slave. Take care of yourself and look at your mind. If you do something, practice the sublime Dharma. If you follow something, follow a qualified teacher. Then think, if you did that, would it be like this? You know, like she's in this situation today. 1, the impervious head of the family. 2, paying taxes through your, though you have nothing to give. 3, the sons you can't do without. When these 3 things convene upon you, Grandma, you're undervalued and you can't make ends meet. So he's describing to this poor old woman her plight. And he's admonishing her, he's teaching her, he's saying, take care of yourself. Really take care of yourself. And look at your mind. If you do something, practice the sublime Dharma. And if you follow something, follow a qualified guru. 1, when you get up, it's like extracting a steak. It's hard to get up. You're like tied down. 2, you walk around like a waddling goose. 3, when you sit, it's like a rock hitting the ground. I know all this to be true. I am 76 years old, and sometimes I feel like I'm waddling around like a duck. When these 3 things convene upon you, Grandma, you're depressed with an old, spent body. Take care of yourself and look at your mind. If you do something, practice the sublime Dharma. If you follow something, follow a qualified teacher. And if you did that, you wouldn't be like this. I'm going to skip some of this, go over. Liberation and higher realms are as rare as daylight star. Samsara and lower realms are more common than your aches and pains. At this dreadful time, when your material body and mind will soon separate, Grandma, you're full of regret without any confidence in death. Take care of yourself. Look at your mind. If you do something, practice the Dharma. If you follow something, follow a qualified teacher. Subsequently, probably her granddaughter comes, the one that was in the field leading all these laborers, comes in. And Milarepa sees that she's pretty advanced for her age, so he gives her deeper teachings. And I'll read a little bit from this, the song he sung her. He said, in my tradition, you don't have to change your name in order to practice Dharma sincerely. So he's talking to this young woman, and he's telling her, you don't have to be a monk. You don't have to change your clothes to practice. He said, since you can attain Buddhahood with a full head of hair, meaning you don't have to cut it. In my case, you wouldn't anyway. You don't have to attain Buddhahood through cutting your hair. You don't need to change your clothes in order to practice Dharma. Then he sang this song of realization, containing the 4 examples along with their meaning, making 5, which describes meditation instructions for the practice of the mind. So he's giving this young woman the key to practice meditation. And he says, O student, Lady Paldarbum, well then, you wealthy one of faith, take the sky as an example. Meditate free of center or edge, saying your mind is so vast. It has neither center nor edge. Think of that. He said, take the sun and the moon as your example. Meditate beyond brightness or darkness. The mind is luminous, vast. And he said, meditate on that. He said, take this mountain as your example. Meditate free from any movement. The mind is unmoving. It has no beginning and, in a sense, no end. It's like a mountain. It's unmovable. And he said, take the great sea as your example. Meditate free of surface or depth. These examples illustrate your mind. Meditate on it, free from any worry or doubt. Once he had sung this, he taught her the essential points of body and mind and had her meditate. The girl gave rise to excellent experience and realization. Then, in order to clear away doubts and hindrances, she offered her song to Milarepa. And then Milarepa replied and said, O student, Lady Paldarbum, listen, you wealthy with faith. If meditating on the sky is easy to do, southern clouds are the magical display of the mind. Just rest in the nature of the sky itself. So she said that's an obstacle sometimes for her, that when she looks at the sky or her mind, it's clouded. And he said, just rest in the nature of your mind. Those are her instructions. Don't be concerned about the fact that on any given day your mind might be a little cloudy. Just rest in the nature of it. That's a profound teaching. She said, I can easily meditate on mind, but meditating on thoughts is not so easy. Please give me the key instructions for meditating on thoughts. And Milarepa replied, if meditating on one's mind is easy to do, thoughts are the magical display of the mind. Just rest in the nature of mind itself. Very profound instructions. So that as we advance in our meditation, Milarepa is telling us our thoughts are not a problem. They just come up, we recognize their nature, and we go on. And in fact, thoughts can inspire us in meditation. Not that we follow them, no, but the idea that we learn that thoughts have no substantial kind of existence. You and I are often led by our thoughts, and that's not a good thing. We know what that does. And Milarepa is saying you don't have to be. You can be liberated from being the slave of your thinking. And he said that's something this young woman can do. So what is the message that comes down to us from Milarepa? Well, that could lead us in a lot of different directions. There's a lot of different reasons why he still is so popular within Tibetan Buddhism. But I'm going to choose one particular thing about Milarepa, and that's his faith. Milarepa teaches us about faith. It's not a word in favor these days, right? People of faith. We may come to Buddhism at first shying away from the whole idea of faith. I know I did. My generation was a generation that was disappointed by their faith traditions. And anything that smelled or smacked of Dharma, I don't want to have anything to do with it. And so when the word faith comes up, it's an obstacle for people of my generation. The fact is, when we didn't accept this dogma that was given to us, we were often shunned or told to go someplace else. And that can be painful. So, that faith was what somebody else told us we had to believe about sacred things that we could not directly experience. That's my thought. Faith was something somebody else taught us about the sacred that we couldn't directly experience ourselves. And today there's a whole nother generation of younger folks who have no religious affiliations or attachments, and they come to this place. You might call what their experience is as destabilized agnosticism. It's like, I'm not in favor of all that stuff that my older generation gave me. But I have this uneasy feeling about being nihilistic. There's something more to all of this. So it's sort of like a destabilized agnosticism. We're asking the question, is this all there is? Is it simply a dog-eat-dog world, a sort of Hieronymus Bosch hellscape? Am I pronouncing that right? Yeah. He was a painter. Painted these really grotesque pictures of greed, narcissism, and conflict. And sometimes when you look out, that's what you see, that sort of picture. So we're asking ourselves, is there a spirituality that is separate from some sort of slavish belief in what cannot be known directly, and that can lead us out of this nihilism? And Milarepa's response in the 100,000 songs celebrate that, yes, there is such a path. But what seems like a contradiction, our lineage does say that that faith is an essential part of our spiritual path. Gampopa, one of Milarepa's students, said that in his manual called Jewel Ornament of Liberation. He said, in fact, faith is an essential quality for our journey towards liberation. Now, here's how our workaround on this. Gampopa divides faith into three parts. Confident faith, desiring faith, and inspired faith. So, first of all, you need to have confident faith. And what's that confident faith is? It's in the teachings of the Buddha. You have to be confident that that's for you. For some people, coming here one time and listening to a talk or reading something about the Buddha inspires their confidence, and they don't, that's it. That's it for them. It was for me 25 years ago or whenever, when I came to this center. It was on a September beautiful morning, and I listened to a talk by Lama, and I said, this is it. This is where I want to find my home. So for some people, that's the way it is. A lot of other people, it's a question of I have to scrutinize, I have to inquire, and that's okay too. In either case, there is an element of faith, a belief that there is something true here that I can find out. But Milarepa tells us we can't be hypocritical about this. He says, it does no good to act outwardly as if you have confidence, but inwardly have nothing but doubts. So these are things you have to work on if you want to follow a path. In this context, confidence might be a better word than faith. A confidence, an inspired confidence, rather than adherence to doctrine. Confidence also has to include interest. You have to be interested in this stuff. And you have to be inspired. We have to be inspired by the Buddhist teachings and by the examples of some of our great teachers. I had the great fortune in my life to have a teacher that was just passion incarnate. And I was lucky to have that. And I wish that for each one of you. But in the meantime, we can have faith in and belief in the teachings of the Buddha. But you got to have interest. Clearly, if we take the Buddha's teaching seriously, we have to have confidence in our ability to make progress. Milarepa did all these horrible things, but he still had confidence that I can get out of this mess. And so each one of us coming here, it's important that you have this confidence that, okay, yeah, it's going to be a tough way to go. Maybe there will be obstacles, there will be obstacles to my practice, but I have confidence I can do it. When we move on to the Vajrayana practices, the higher practice of Tantra, there we learn to have confidence in a teacher we call a guru. But even here, we have to scrutinize that teacher. It's not some blind thing. In fact, the scriptures tells us that in many cases, we have to scrutinize that teacher for as long as 12 years. So it's not just, although, the first time I met Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, I knew that's who I wanted to be. I had no question about it. But on the other hand, for most of us, it does take some time to develop that sort of situation. So Milarepa's life was a life of confident faith. He was confident not only to be that he did not have to be eternally identified as a malefactor, as a murderer. He didn't have to be identified as that. He believed in his abilities, mind, to make progress. He had confidence in the teachings, and he showed devotion to his teachers. The other thing I want to point out to you is that on this Buddhist path, our faith is ever evolving, ever changing, always seeking a greater integration and a more subtle understanding of what really is the truth. I've been with students who say, "Oh, I got it." And I said, "You got it for the moment." But there's probably more to it than this aha moment that you have right now. It's deeper than that. And so at each level, we become more, the truth becomes more integrated in our lives. And some of the previous things that we held so tightly on our Buddhist path, we can let go of, even abandon. Dzogchen Ponlop Rinpoche says, our faith is like a cardiogram, one of those things. He said it will go up and down. There's a story in the songs about Rinpoche, who is a fairly realized being, who went to Milarepa, and in fact, even though he had great teachings and a long history of being on the Dharma path, he lost his faith momentarily. And that story was a beautiful story of how he recovered his faith. But that's going to happen. On this path, it's up and down. In fact, if your faith flatlines, just stays the same, it probably means your faith is dead. It's going to come and go. And that's natural. So there is a clear trajectory for this path. And we're aided in this journey by our going to refuge, generating bodhicitta, the love for other beings and wanting to be of benefit to them. Purification, there's purifying practices we can do. There's ways we can accumulate merit, and there's ways we can connect with our teachers. So going back to confidence, confident faith is not sufficient to travel this path. Milarepa shows us that we have to have perseverance. There's going to be trouble along the way. There's going to be obstacles. And if you are not persevering, you're going to lose out. I'll try to tell this story quickly. I went through a 3-year retreat, and at the very end, I almost lost faith. I left retreat, went down to my guru's house, subsequently regained my faith and went back. But the point being is, it's going to be up and down, and it's okay. The other thing that Milarepa had that we frequently lack, besides perseverance, is enthusiasm. If we really understood what could be the result of our practice, we'd be pretty energetic. We would be very disciplined. So, I'm going to wind up here. Recognizing the nature of our mind, which is at the very peak of our Dharma path, to understand the nature of reality is not something that's going to happen automatically. We each come to Dharma with our own karma. Milarepa came with his, I come with mine, you come with yours. We each will progress on the path in different ways based upon that karma. We're not going to probably adopt the lifestyle of Milarepa, but we can aspire to his confident faith his diligence, his discipline, and his relaxed persistence for the long haul. This is my wish for myself, and it's certainly my wish for you. I've gone over, pardon me, we started early and we're ending up a little late. I apologize for that. If anybody has any comments or thoughts they would like to put out there, you're welcome to do that. Good morning. And you're going to have to speak sort of loud. And
Good morning.
By the way, if anyone has to leave, that's not a problem.
So I had a question. I didn't know if you could answer it real quickly. As someone who has sort of a lack of confidence in my own abilities, but I have a lot of faith in the Dharma, how can I practice in a way to develop confidence within myself so that I can have more trust and faith in the Dharma?
What a great question. The first thing you say is that you have trust in the Dharma, right? So the important thing here is to maintain that trust. And if you practice, you will start to begin to have confidence in your ability to practice. They sort of go hand in hand. The other thing is, the teaching is, and eventually the experience is, that within your heart is a goodness that is beyond belief. That's your Buddha nature. It's there. And part of the path is uncovering that beautiful nature that is within you. It's within each of us. And that's the beauty of this path. Slowly, 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 we uncover this heart of goodness, this heart of love. And we do that by cultivating compassion. And there are specific practices related to developing that compassion. You might not fully understand how compassionate you truly can be. There's a practice called Tonglen. Have you heard of it? Yeah, Tonglen. And that can help you uncover that heart, that beautiful heart that exists within you. And slowly, slowly, you have confidence that you can do this.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're running a little late, so let's dedicate the merit. It's called dedication of merit. We'll say it in English also. By this merit of our being here this morning, our listening, our good intentions, our pure intentions of being here, all that's meritorious. You could be doing anything besides being here, but you came here, and that's meritorious. So by this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. The courageous Manjushri, who knows everything as it is, Samanta Bhadra, who also knows in the same way, and all the bodhisattvas, that I may follow in their path. I completely dedicate all this virtue. Thank you all and have a great week. Sorry to have kept you a little.